Jane VanVooren Rogers, and I'm so proud and honored to be here today with David Romero, who is a spoken word artist from Los Angeles, California. And we are here today to talk about his third full-length book of poetry, My Name is Romero. There we go. Perfect. So, David, happy birthday and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'm really honored that this is the last episode, I believe, in your schedule for the season, and or at least that had been the announcement at the time. So I'm very, very glad that I was able to connect with you through Facebook and get onto the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for reaching out, and I'm so impressed with your work and just so excited to hear more about it. I'm just going to show your book here in the stream. So, My Name is Romero by David A. Romero. So, tell us a little bit how this book came about.
All right. So, this book of poetry is my third full-length collection. It is my first to be published by an independent press. The previous books had been self-published. So this is my fourth book all in all. But yeah, this book really emerges after writing the eponymous poem of the collection, My Name is Romero. And after writing that poem, I had really been starting to become fascinated with digging into issues of my identity as a white passing Pocho, Chicano, multi-generational Mexican American, and then as well as exploring my family's history, talking about issues of language, of colorism, of microaggressions, of racism, of internalized racism. This idea of history really became a cornerstone of not just my own family history. I like that we have a comment.
Yeah, we're getting comments. Love the color. Cindy says, got your book yesterday. Excellent. I admire your voice. So yeah, thank you guys so much for participating. Keep it coming.
So with all of that is writing this poem, it started to give form to everything else. And this poem is mostly a funny poem, a humorous poem, but there are serious bits in there. And of course it all starts with a microaggression. So then that became a reflection of a lot of the other things that would be part of the collection. And delving into the various aspects of naming, of identity. What does it mean to come, to be a member of a family? What does it mean to be a member of a community? Yes, and so I found myself writing around these themes and exploring this in greater depth. And the more that I did, the more rewarding the process became. And this book has really become my most well-received of all of my collections. It was reviewed by Gustavo Arellano of Ask a Mexican fame. One of my former professors, Curtis Marez, is a very accomplished academic. He reviewed it. Ulysses Bea of Ozo Motley, the Latin Grammy-winning band, and one of the greatest touring live bands that you will ever see. Really, really amazing multi-instrumentalist and phenomenal human being. So I'm very, very grateful to him for having reviewed the collection as well. So yeah, it's caught a lot of attention. It's been reviewed in 3 different countries, in Canada, in England, and here in the United States. And I feel like it is my most well-accomplished work to date, and my most consistent body of work to date.
Very nice. So how long have you been a spoken word artist?
So I started writing poetry about, now I like many authors out there, I also had my angsty teenage phase,
Sure.
I should have known from the start. I tried. Why? Because you lied, We've
all written that kind of poetry, I think.
We've all written that poem. but it was really within my college years, attending the University of Southern California, that I became aware of spoken word poetry. A friend of mine, Eduardo Virgen, suggested that we attend a poetry lounge in Hollywood on Fairfax and Melrose. And attending that really, it deeply, profoundly changed my life and set it on a course. So since then, I've been writing poetry, consistently for about 15 years, and every transition period in that, from summoning up the courage to attend open mics, to perform my work in public, to then performing at colleges for money, locally at first, to hosting various open mics, to go attending a wide variety and building networks and putting on events, to then, traveling out of state, and everything else within this period. It's been a phenomenal journey, and really something that, I don't know if it could have happened otherwise.
Well, that's so awesome, to be building those kinds of networks and getting those kinds of audiences too. I know that often for poets, that's like a dream come true, to be able to, be up there sharing your work with these large audiences. And then, like you said, being paid to do it too. It's like, oh my goodness, that's living the dream right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things too is that we would see people travel through towns, and they were very Kerouacian, if that's such a phrase.
Yes.
They would travel, with their backpacks or their one, piece of luggage, and they would, just drive through the country or bus through the country, going from venue to venue to venue. No, I don't do that. But I too have kept that dream within my heart of taking my talents to the road, and there were a lot of people that I really looked up to. Saul Williams, Sage Francis, Mark Gonzalez, Maida Del Valle were two of the last two were two of the first poets that I ever saw in person who really left an indelible mark. And one particular poet, Gabriela Garcia Medina, who was a friend of my cousin, Sonia Romero's, she was a nationally touring poet, and she might still to this day be the most successful touring poet of all time. And if anyone doubts, I don't know, people may have made more, but I don't know if anyone has ever done more dates than she has. Her calendar is ridiculous in at the height of her touring schedule. That she was really someone that I looked up to, of like, wow, so now at this point I can say that I have performed at 75 colleges and universities in 30 different states.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is tremendous. That is awesome. Congratulations. Very cool. And I'm sure you're reaching a lot of people with your work. And are you getting, a lot of positive feedback that way?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's very beautiful. One of the things that I love most about traveling is meeting all of these different people and learning about various different communities. One of my big points of focus is talking about the demographic shift in the United States and how people of color are becoming the majority population by 2044 or earlier. So one of the things that I really like to do, I'm a history buff, aside. My dad always used to take us to history museums, when I was a child. So he was very focused on having us learn and be very educated. But, and taking it to my work as a professional is, I have a very vested interest in observing these changes and witnessing, the rise of populations. Especially something very fascinating for me has been, and maybe actually this has to do with the fact that people within my own community have always constantly, cast doubt upon my identity, but, kind of capturing these communities in where, Mexicans were not expected to be there. Latinx people were not expected to be there. They might have told that, they don't belong there. either by Caucasians or their own people, of like this kind of idea. And this is something that I've constantly run into, and especially in coming into contact with communities that have a strong historical tie, specifically, for example, East LA or Boyle Heights. And I'm a great fan of East LA and Boyle Heights and people of those communities. But sometimes they have this attitude of like, well, if you're not from here, then you're not really Mexican. You're not really one of us. You're something else. You've become something else. In many ways, we have become something else. But that being said, is that I think one of the beautiful things about why my work has been able to resonate with so many people is because there are all these populations all over, Mexicans in Wisconsin, Mexicans in Illinois, Mexicans in Iowa, and Latinx people, all over. So, and I think everyone has felt this, this feeling, whether it be culture, gender, religion, whatever it is, of not being sure if they truly fit, if they check all the boxes, if they fit into all those categories. So yeah, I'm really glad that they are enough, in many cases too, So I'm really glad that my work speaks to that and helps people feel more rested within themselves.
Absolutely. Well, we're already getting some great questions here in the chat. But before we get into those, could we just go ahead and hear the title poem from your book first, just to kind of
sure.
And then we'll then I'll sort of go back and work in the questions. So again, thank you for those, and we'll get to those here in just a minute. So whenever you're ready, we'll just go ahead with My Name is Romero.
It happens every single night. Telemarketing Juliets, calling from their ivy-covered balconies, calling for their star-crossed lovers, calling, hello, is Mr. Romeo in? I'm sorry, Romeo went to go grab a burrito, Mercutio to cruise Whittier Boulevard, and Shakespeare to take some ethnic studies lessons. In other words, Romeo isn't in. My name is Romero. I am not Italian. Centuries-old Spanish blood coursing through these veins, though my parents are not from Spain. And despite the Southern Californian accent, allows words like dude, sweet, and sick to tumble gracefully from these lips. I'm not a white guy. I'm a Mexican. My name is Romero. Romero like a brand of tortillas that escaped with Guerrero and Mission from the segregation of the ethnic food section into the main aisles of your local supermarket. My name is Romero. Romero like Archbishop Oscar Romero, zombie filmmaker George A. Romero, actor Cesar Romero. Yes, before Jack Nicholson, before Heath Ledger, a brown man played the Joker. They dressed him up in purple suit, green wig, and white face, though he would not shave his trademark suave and sexy Latin mustache. No, he was a Romero. I am a Romero. My parents had dark hair and dark eyes. When I was 7, my brother lied, told me that my father was the mailman. How could you be the son of our parents with your blue eyes and white skin? Well, brother, like Jerry Springer or Maori, the DNA results are in. I am a Romero, and I know what some of you are thinking. That I'm just another white guy trying to prove he's a Latino, or just another Mexican chest beating his chest, beating whatever reputation he has left in the process, trying to convince you that his family, his country, his nationality are better than you. Well, I know as well as anyone that we are all the children of Africa, roots of no single family tree, but of a flourishing forest that grows collectively towards a magnificent destiny, shining, radiating beauty. Just please close your eyes and you can see it. But forget that. The name of this poem isn't "We Are the World, We Are the Children." No, the name of this poem is "My Name is Romero," because if you're not proud of who you are, then what are you going to be proud of? And if you don't know where you come from, how are you supposed to know where you're going? And I know one thing, that the name of my father and my father's father and his father's father before him was Romero.
Beautiful. So awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Woo! That was great. Okay, so let me look at some of the questions here. Okay, so let's go with, let's see. Okay. All right, so one question we have, let me go back to the first one here. So from Juanita Mance, who was on the show a while ago with her book Portrait of a Deputy Public Defender. She says, how do you deal with feeling uncomfortable writing in Spanish? She says, I write in my, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Paca Spanish in my memoir. Pocha, yeah. I'm sorry. Pocha Spanish in my memoir to capture dialogue between my mom and her dad. But I always have people double check. It's so hard. So do you have comments about that? How do you deal with feeling uncomfortable writing in Spanish?
Yes, that definitely has been a concern of mine. So yeah, Juanita has been commenting a lot about using this word pocha. So this pocha, it means whitewashed, essentially. So there's pocha, pocho. Pocho.com is a website, focusing by Lalo Alcaraz, focusing on highlighting pocho culture, which is its own thing, Mexican American, culture. These issues of not being able to speak this language we come from this culture, and we're expected to speak it by both people from the inside and the outside. So because we're always left on the periphery because of that, or very often we find ourselves in the periphery, in this weird limbo between worlds, as it were, as pochos. And for myself, my family, we were raised never to speak Spanish. My father's side of the family, they were taught never to. On my mother's side of the family, my grandmother actually refused to learn English. So a big difference there. But with that being said, it was the way that we were raised, and we never really came into it. I unfortunately took an interest in learning French, so for some reason. I know French.
And I know you talk about that in one of your poems in the book too.
Yeah, and I haven't been disciplined enough to learn Spanish. So, but with that being said, is that my poems will use Spanish that I've heard. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of friends, who are Latinx and who are, fluent in Spanish, who are bilingual and or if they're not fully competent, they will use Spanish very often. So it comes from my time with them, really, and picking up the patterns, the slang. But yeah, there are often times where I'm trying to convey something in my poems that I've seen the word written numerous times, but I don't actually know how to pronounce it, which is embarrassing enough in your primary language when that happens. But it's doubly embarrassing when you're actually trying to reach out into something, else. So yeah, it's very hard for me. It is an ongoing struggle. But I find that it is something. It's worthy work to do. And for example, in my novel, I have a character who uses Spanish a lot. I've been writing a novel. It's a murder mystery thriller, and and I have this character from Boyle Heights, Sochi, and Sochi is bilingual and will often speak Spanish more often when she's upset, as I can attest to within my own family, and seeing that with my mom and a few of my cousins and whatnot, is that there is that tendency of when one is very passionate, the original language comes out, or
Oh,
the one that suits the
absolutely.
emotions. And I have been using a lot of Google Translate to do that, but
Well, Google Translate is my friend as well. At times when I'm trying to write things to my husband in Spanish. So it's like, wait, I know this word, but I don't know that word, or I don't remember the past tense of that verb and all that kind of stuff.
nice,
So
nice. So yeah, definitely. I feel like that the it is very difficult. It is very difficult, but I think it's one of those things of like I'm constantly being made fun of, but then other people are like, wow, I see you're really trying to do something here. And for example, this book, which actually has criticisms of Spanish and of people who insist upon that that's the only way to be genuine, is currently being translated into Spanish by a professor of
oh
translation.
gosh.
So yeah, so
That's
I
awesome.
definitely I think that we do need to make us pochas, and pochexes out there, that we need to make conscious efforts to bridge that gap.
That's an interesting point. And so in your family, why would you say that that was an element? Was it just that your family just didn't really prioritize that, or they kind of specifically went sort of away from that, or what would you say were the reasons? I guess just that you didn't end up, speaking Spanish when you were younger.
Oh, that's a great question. So it brings to light that, as is the case in many multi-generational Mexican American families, or even within certain immigrant communities, very often you have the pushing of the American dream, that this is the only, you have to assimilate, you have to make a clean break with your nation. But in the case of us, multi-generational Chicanx people within the United States, is that you're talking about the idea of a internal colony, of an internal colony within the United States. So very
Mm.
often, the idea that the American Southwest, which my family's roots are from New Mexico, is that at one point that's New Spain, at one point that's Mexico, before the Mexican American War. And then as that comes in, is there are certain expectations, to speak English, to assimilate, very quickly to the culture. Speaking Spanish becomes more suspect, becomes more, associated with potential criminal activity, and
Mm.
very, very frowned upon. And especially, you look at mission culture and all of that being another, force of assimilation. So what ends up happening, and also, is my great no, three, two, one of those. I'm getting lost right now. He was a white man. I'm sure, as some of you may have suspected already, he was not just Spaniard, but he was German, French, English. Something, one of these mixes. And then his son, who was abandoned by him, was abandoned by this man, Mr. Howard. Well, actually, no, he didn't abandon. He was killed because he was no good. Or salt thief. He was into a whole salt trade, and then they shot him
Oh
after he
gosh.
betrayed his business partners. Well, anyways, his son, who grows up, without a father, because of his white ancestry in Texas, growing up in this environment, there are all these pressures for him to actually embrace his whiteness. So then this is kind of the legacy that's brought into the family, of like this,
Mm.
well, you're part white and you can somewhat pass for white, so you should really be as white and as pro-American as possible. So it's a great irony of history, I find, but one that makes a lot of sense in other ways.
That's interesting too, just talking about those sorts of pressures, to either be more white and assimilate and speak English and go away, from your native language, or that, in order to be a real, Chicanx or Latinx person, that you need to be able to speak Spanish and that you shouldn't be, a pocho, and stuff like that. So how do you sort of begin to, I know that's obviously something that you deal a lot with in this book. How do you begin to sort of explore and reconcile that?
Yeah. So, the funny thing about it is, so within my own family, I think that really brings a lot of things into relief is that, I think in some families will never experience this, but within my own family is that, half of us have brown skin, half of my siblings have brown skin. And then me and one of my sisters, we both can pass for white. We have, white skin and she has green eyes. I have blue eyes. So within that, there kind of becomes this, fetishization amongst our cousins, amongst aunts, uncles, stuff like that of like, ooh, look how beautiful these blue, white. And they fetishize at the expense. And this then in turn builds resentment from my other siblings, right? So this kind of idea, and then everyone starts fronting this idea of like, oh, you're the chosen one. Because you. So it's really a problematic kind of thing. There becomes this, I guess the advantages and building up from the advantages, because all of these things are perceived as being, better and, wonderful and all of that. But then also, at the same time, the hate and I guess the pressure and, and then going out into the world and then realizing that not everyone thinks like the way that we were conditioned to think. We were conditioned to fetishize these things, to want to assimilate. And a lot of the world, functions on, we're here. We never had these crises of, self-belief and, we're awesome. We, in our own country, we belong. We are the normal people. They don't carry that same, feeling that we do. So I think it has been a very fascinating process to go on this journey of evaluating the past, or evaluating my own personal history and thinking about how that reflects, and very often that is very many other people's journey that they've gone on as well.
It puts me in mind of your poem. Is it Sweet Poch's Pie?
Yes, Sweet Poch's Pie.
Sweet Poch's Pie. Would you like to share that one with us?
Yes. Let's see here. This is, where is it? It is after. I found it. Okay. I'm as American, as sweet. This time I'm gonna read it as Pocho. So I'm gonna be less inclusive here. It just rolls off the tongue easier that way. I'm as American as sweet Pocho pie. Light flaky crust, identity crisis inside. Like apples to oranges, we are pochos, children of these lands claimed, ambassadors to a great American immigration that often doesn't want us. Our ancestors were criminalized for speaking Spanish, yet we're expected to speak it flawlessly, without an accent, expected to fit a stereotypical appearance while Spanish language TV stations display the opposite. Ask someone on a Latinx panel how to succeed in America. They will answer, remember, you are a professional first, Latinx second. As if the two were mutually exclusive. Pochos pronounce our last names wrong, argue this has become right, as my name is Romero becomes my name is Romero, and rolling R's seem as silly to me as caricatures of twirling mustaches. When saying my own name properly makes me feel like Zorro, like Detroit Red becoming Malcolm X, or like a boy named Sue with something to prove. Pochos can make for the best of activists, carrying chips on our shoulders the size of boulders, emblazoned scrolls upon these read, doubt, shame, guilt, enough for late nights and long marches to connect with the people, ambassadors to a great American immigration that often doesn't want us, teases us bare and naked, points out how tenuous our relationship to being Latinx is, how it so easily crumbles like a light, flaky crust, more apple than orange, sweet pocho pie sold out here. Gringo, gringa, gringax, they cry. Some pochos are sliced into a permanent state of denial, cut themselves white or other for pie charts. Others go on journey of discovery of their Latinx roots with all the subtlety and discretion of Christopher Columbus, leaving division and destruction in their wake, crushed hopes, broken dreams, promises of a piece of the pie with nothing inside. That's why some in our communities fear us. Who are we? The pochos you didn't want, the pochos you taunt for trying to be everything to everyone. We laugh, dance, scream, sing, argue, and smile. We taste sweet as pocho pie. Smell the air, look at the crowd, feast upon their eyes. America loves sweet pocho pie.
Wow. So interesting. I love the line piece of pie with nothing inside. That's really powerful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely think, is for me, that poem or that piece of the poem was highlighting like this idea of I guess a fear, right? Is because when some people do make it, they abandon their communities, and especially those that don't have a solid tie to their communities. And so for me, and it's something this kind of form of cultural imperialism of that. For many years, I was very happy to visit a community arts and activism center in Boyle Heights, where my dad was from, which is a very historic, Mexican community, and in dealing with that and knowing that I came from middle class privilege, and I also had this chip on my shoulder about being a pocho and everything, is trying to be very conscious of the way, very conscientious of the way I was relating to, people there and carrying myself, and being very cognizant of the promises I made and, being, fulfilling my word and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think I carried that with me of like, okay, yes, you have to be very responsible everywhere you go and what you say and what you do and how you relate to people in various communities and keep your word.
But it also really feels like embracing, a pejorative term, embracing and owning that, and again, flipping that around into something positive, the way that, the way that people who've, been put down over the years, whether it's, various racial and ethnic groups, or whether it's women, as an example, like the Bitch magazine as an example, taking that and taking that term and being like, okay, we're going to present this in a different way. We're going to own this and present it in a different way that's, positive and empowering, for women, instead of being a pejorative term. So your poem definitely seems to strike on that again, rather than being, spoken of in a negative way of, oh, you claim to be part of this culture, but you don't speak, the language, that you're flipping that around and embracing it. Would you say that that's a piece of the pocho pie for you?
Yes, absolutely. That's the whole dish.
Right.
And that traces back to the term Chicano itself. So Chicano itself is actually, it begins as a pejorative term. It begins used in much of the same way that pocho is used now. So very much, there was a time where, Chicano was, to be Chicano was looked down upon. To be Chicanx was to be looked down upon. If you weren't a Mexican national, then you weren't a real Mexican. If you hadn't been born in Mexico, then you weren't a real Mexican. You were Chicano. It's just the other, kind of gross, and all of these, kind of slimy, connotations. And I actually really love. There's this movie El Norte, directed by Gregory Nava, and they kind of you have in some cases Chicanos playing Mexican nationals, and they're like making fun of Chicanos. They say, "Oh, those people, oh, aren't they Mexican?" No, they're not Mexican. They're Chicanos. You can't trust them. So I think that's really great. That's really great. But yeah, and I think too is that there was one of my favorite poems, or actually in a body of work by one of my favorite poets, Saul Williams, is he turns the N word on its head, as well, and transforms it from a symbol of, of hate and inequality into a symbol of empowerment, and reflecting in many of the ways that the word has been transformed through, various eras now of hip hop. So but further contextualizing that through the frame of religion and history and ethnography and all of these different things. So I've always been very, very inspired by his work, and I was glad to do a little bit of that there in a little bit more of a stand-up comedy routine kind of thing, but with consistent motifs. So there you go.
But I think you have such a great laugh. And I think, but I think you raised such great points though, too, about, in Latinx culture, how there can be space for everyone, and there can be space for, people who speak Spanish, people who don't speak Spanish, people who, look a certain way, people who look, more white and what have you. And so, but I can see that I think there are such complex challenges there. And I guess, especially with the language barrier as well, that, again, I have some bonus kids who are more of Chicano descent, and they're not as embracing of Spanish. And so if it comes time to speak, to their Mexican grandparents, they're like, dude, I got nothing. Like, I can say hola and I can listen a little and I can understand, but again, I think that's so, hard sometimes to, when there's a language barrier like that, and kind of a cultural barrier when, these kids, were born in the US and have only lived in the US, and it's not that, I don't think that they don't want to embrace their culture or their ancestry and learn about that. But when you don't have the tools sort of to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is with language and especially children and learning a lot of things. I mean, I've been helping to take care of my nieces for about last half of this year, and trying to teach them things. Is that something I've really learned, is that if they're not constantly being exposed to something, they're not going to learn it. Someone is not, sitting them down saying, you have to learn this, learn it right now. You won't get any dinner. You won't get any, whatever. And obviously, your children are adults, I'm speaking, in the context of children, but yeah, I mean, I think, with anyone and even with myself, no one is sitting me down, forcing me, and I'm not in an environment where I have to learn, in order for survival, in order to, manage my way through the world. So I think these are the challenges, definitely, in picking up, language, is that if we are not in an immersive environment, we're not, and there's no pressing need, or no one is, sitting us down and enforcing these things upon us, then it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, sometimes not having that exposure or not having that language immersion, like you said, you can't be expected that suddenly you're just going to know that, or you're going to be able to speak. So, okay, let me go to one of Cindy's questions. I'm going to try to pause on my questions here and go to other people. So, Cindy, thank you so much for your question. She says, the poems in your book don't shy away from your political point of view, for which I agree. Thank you. How do you handle any opposing views and hecklers? LOL, you're so brave.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Cindy. That's a great question. So yes, this definitely is concern of concern, especially on the road. Is fortunately, I've never had like death threats or anything like that. I have a friend, Matt Cedillo, who is an even more political poet than I am, and he has received death threats, and that doesn't seem nice. But I definitely had. At the University of New Hampshire, I was on stage and I was speaking about Trump and before his presidency, and that was, I remember that was a time where a lot of people weren't taking him seriously. There were a lot of people thinking that this could never happen, that someone would step in, or these numbers were being exaggerated or whatever it was. There were a lot of delusions, at the time, about how deeply racist, portions of the country were, and how convincing his messaging was to them. But that, yes, I was on stage speaking about him, and a group of MAGA kids, MAGA hat wearing kids, came into the room, and they started chanting, Trump, 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 and I let him go for a little while, and I finally said, okay, is that it? Is that it? And they're just kind of looking around like really awkward, and I said, okay, you can go now. and they did. Unfortunately, they did. So in certain cases you can be really lucky, but ultimately what it takes is just that kind of that patience and that courage. I don't something that a lot of people waste a lot of time on is trying to convince people of things. Now, you might think, oh, you're so political in this work, it seems like it's trying to convince. Yeah, but like in life, I don't spend a lot of time trying to have teachable moments with people. Someone that I come across on the bus, I'm not going to, hey, you need to really, check your this and that. And because I found that most of the time those things, they don't really work. People kind of come around to things on their own time, on their own schedule. And in many cases, it's multiple things. Now, is it possible that I could be one of those things in their life? Possibly, but I think there's a lot of fallacy that people approach situations with, this idea of like, you can sit one person down and in 10 minutes completely irrevocably change their worldview. I think is just kind of ridiculous. So there have been a few other instances, people you're not really Mexican, or go back to Mexico, I've heard a couple of times, or shut up, or these kinds of things have definitely happened while I've been on stage. But a lot of the time it's a lot more mundane than that, I'll tell you. People being upset that I'm on stage, it's usually because I'm interrupting their regularly scheduled programming. So they could be in the middle of watching a game, and the people booked me to perform there, or like they're used to having trivia night there, and now they have to hear, spoken word poetry.
Oh gosh.
And I think I'm pretty entertaining, right?
You are.
But still, people is like, that's, poetry is not everyone's cup of tea,
Right. Well, I see one of Juanita Mansa's comments as she says, exactly, within our own communities, we create cliques and who's cool, who's a true Mexican. And she says, as a Latina punk rock girl, I always feel like an outsider. How do you deal with kind of those elements of feeling like an outsider at times? And again, obviously, that's something that you talk about a lot in your writing.
Yeah. Well, that was something that I used to really feel insecure about, like very deeply. But now what I've really arrived at is kind of a feeling of like, if I'm in an environment where people are speaking Spanish, to just, accept that, this is not my time, and try to gather what I can from what limited knowledge of the language that I have, and observing body language and interactions, and try to, enjoy the experience and learn from the experience and gain what I can and see if I can learn Spanish, while I'm there, and just accept that, it's cool to shut up for a second. Sometimes is, whatever, some people, they have the defensiveness kicks in, which I think is, a lot of like, in one of my poems, I have this line, I could be as defensive as any gringo or gabacho over Spanish spoken, right? And so I know what this feeling is to be sitting somewhere and hearing people speaking in another language and then just assume that they're speaking about me, which is just complete and utter vanity. But I know that that's a feeling that people feel even when people are talking in their own language. So it's even compounded by, so you just getting past that point of, no, they're not talking about you. People don't give a crap about generally out in the world. And just like, and even if they are, who cares? What does it matter? Is it really gonna, slow down your day? So there's that. And then, with subcultures is like, yeah, I'll have people come in and, I'll say something that's incorrect because I'm supposed to be this expert in saying these things. And then someone will school me. They'll say, wow, that's really just embarrassing what you said there. Like, that's common knowledge that, whatever. It's like, oh, okay. Oops. I gotta remember that next time, and then, but in the reverse, people have said to me things that are wholly inaccurate, just the most ridiculous things of like, but they're so convinced that they understand, the history of something or this or that. And so it becomes, very complicated in that way. Yeah. And having accomplished things in life certainly gives one a certain amount of latitude to, okay, I can be comfortable in any room,
So one comment that Cindy shares, she says, I stopped apologizing for not knowing Spanish and I don't give an explanation.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's great, Cindy, and anyone else who shares in that sentiment is, I think that is very empowering. For myself, I always feel like I do have some splaining to do, like, that's owed, and I always like too, is that it always seems to be a great way to talk about these issues of identity and talk about my own family history. It always seems like, and then sort of people like, okay, this is going on too long. I think that yes, it is wonderful to really embrace the fact that, because of the blood that flows through your veins of who you are, on all of these things, and your family is your story, and that you are always Latinx, no matter what, if you are Latinx, but at the same time, having had so much contact, I think that's one of the things that has really changed, is that, for example, in writing Undocumented Football, which is the story of an undocumented student athlete. Now, I myself am not undocumented. No one in my family is undocumented. We're all multi-generational. And you would have to go much further back in my family line to come into contact with someone who was undocumented. But obviously, I think it's beautiful. I've had a lot of friends who have been undocumented, over the years, and and heard about their many life struggles that they've gone through, and I tried to capture that in that poem, for example. And in performing that poem and talking about issues about the border and a lot about the struggles DACA and a lot of these, and border violence by vigilante groups as well as ICE and U.S. Border Customs and Enforcement is that find myself in a lot more personal conversations, surrounding these issues. And I kind of realize that there is more of this obligation, is that there are these people that I am speaking to and in some cases speaking for. And that becomes a responsibility. That becomes an obligation. So this concern of like being defensive and being like, well, I don't need to learn how to speak Spanish. I don't need to change. I don't need to, whatever, then kind of gives way to, no, this is, there is something here that needs to be worked upon. But I'm sympathetic to anyone who feels different. Definitely.
So one of Cindy's comments, she says, "That's a rap ode to the burrito, was so funny and truth." Could we hear that one from you?
Oh, sure. So let's see here. I have this one partially memorized, but I always am wary. So I always use this as my backup. Oh my God, I've got the greatest idea. We'll take the pride of your people, the most significant dish your culture has ever produced, and we'll turn it into a sandwich. No, a salad. Not a hamburger. No. I've got it. We'll throw it all on top of a doughy flour tortilla and just wrap it up. Ah, hell no. The seventh seal was broken. The seventh trumpet was sounded, and from the seas arose a dark and unholy beast. Its name featured on fast food menus and neon signs all over the country. The Rap, the focus group of foods. You were assembled from the rotting carcasses of recipes killed by cultural appropriation. You are a Frankenstein, a monster, and for those travelers who journeyed throughout Mexico and the Southwest on burros, who invented the burrito, the little donkey, you are truly an ass. Scraps of better foods whose quality was sacrificed at the unholy altar of on the go. You are simultaneously warm chicken and cool salad. You are lukewarm. I will spit you out and reject you as they reject us. Those who want to cash in on the popularity of the burrito but deny Spanish from the menu. Those who love Mexican food but hate Mexicans. And what have we given to the world? The burrito is a pillow for your mouth. It is a voluptuous breast, a full butt cheek, and only for the poor in spirit is there something threatening about its size. It is pollo, carnitas, carne asada, and not ground beef, with or without a side of beans and rice, guacamole, please, but no pinche sour cream. The burrito is quite simply an essay on humanity's struggle for greatness. Greatness achieved. It is all the things that a rap is not. Ban raps forever. Burn all images that carry their name and likeness in effigy. And on that brave new day, you'll find me at El Tepeyac in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, eating a burrito as big as your head. The end.
Very nice. Thank you so much. There's a lot in there for sure. I think there's a lot of ingredients in that. No.
Yes, many ingredients. Yes, I always love. Yes, one of the best things about writing about food. So I'm definitely. I don't know if I'm a foodie. I mean, I definitely have some pretty basic tastes when it comes to food. I love American casual dining, diner food and whatnot. But having grown up, in a Chicano household and being raised on, cheese enchiladas and beans and rice and, burritos and chile rellenos and tamales, we'd make tamales every year is, like that would be kind of my refuge. Of like, that's home. And that's where I feel, the most like I am Mexican, and then this idea of actually the origin of this poem. So I'm very happy to share. I was at a friend of the family's event, and there was a woman there who I didn't recognize. So I, introduced myself to her. She was very friendly. And I asked, "What do you do?" And she said, "Oh, I work for Taco Bell." And I said, "Oh, very interesting. What do you do there?" And she said, "Oh, well, I work at the test kitchen." I said, "Test kitchen? What's that?" And she said, "Well, it's a kitchen. It's a replication in the corporate offices. It's a replication of the test of any kitchen that you would find in any Taco Bell. It has all the same, equipment, and it has all the same ingredients. And what I do is I get flown out to sample all of the foods in all these different Latin American countries and regions, particularly regions of Mexico. And then I try to figure out, I either directly ask them what the recipe is, or I try to figure out what the recipe is. And I go back and I try to replicate it in that test kitchen. And I thought, wow, this is really nefarious. This is really disgusting. And, I never liked Taco Bell. If any of our dear listeners today, any of our dear viewers do, good on you. But I've never liked Taco Bell, and I just thought that this was the most disgusting thing in the world, because there's a difference between appreciating something and learning and trying to replicate because it you love the thing, or you came from that culture, or you didn't come from that culture, but you also, you have, best friends, or, whatever it might be. You had strong ties to that culture. There's a difference between that, and there's a difference between a multinational corporation sending people to poach, food, and then selling it to those communities and telling them, that this is, this is a chalupa.
Exactly.
Is molita. This is, whatever, these very traditional forms of food. And in some cases, in talking about the diaspora of these communities in the United States, especially of Latinx communities, is that sometimes they have no tie. There is no, like, I talk about Manuel's El Tepeyac, is that this is kind of like a cornerstone of our family. Is like, we go there to feel Mexican. We go there.
We have comments about that too in our comments. So.
Yeah. So many people know that this is an internationally renowned, restaurant, but it is, very much part of its community, and has been for a long, long time, for decades now. And that when you're talking about these communities in these other parts of the country, they have no equivalent. There is no long-standing traditional restaurant. So, when Taco Bell sets up shop, and that's the only Mexican food that they can receive, I mean, this is a travesty,
Well, I think you make some interesting points there too, that again, I think get into some kind of dicey things and some fine lines there of, how do you appreciate a culture and learn about a culture without appropriating that culture, or without, straight up stealing, from that culture, and or Americanizing that culture. And, I think you're definitely hitting on that with even the voice, that you do in the poem of kind of the California Valley girl, voice of, again, like, oh, I've got this great idea. We're just gonna, steal your stuff. And it's like, so this is, and present it in such a way that, I mean, again, that it dishonors what the original thing was, and really is not, representative of that. So, and I think you also, just raise a good point that there are many people who, love Mexican food, but aren't necessarily as embracing of Mexican or Latinx people and the language and things like that too. So do you have, kind of thoughts, I guess, about how to interact appropriately with things like that, and to, again, to have a spirit of learning and inclusion without, sort of going too far with it?
Well,
I know
Jane,
it's a really complex question.
I'm extremely glad that you asked, because I actually teach workshops on cultural appropriation. I've spoken at a dozen universities. Just yesterday, I spoke to students at The Hague in the Netherlands regarding this very topic.
Oh, wow.
And so in talking about that, it's very important that there are these two things: cultural appropriation and appreciation. And even as I will define, I'm going to give this caveat: what may be appropriation for one may be appreciation for another, and vice versa. So there is, while I will say that there's a line for, people in the real world, these lines are constantly, overlapping and intersecting. But that being said, I do feel that there is such a thing as cultural appropriation. So now cultural appropriation is the extraction of cultural elements from one culture, very often a minority culture. So these are the arts, symbols, food, music, rituals, and what have you. And these are taken by members of the dominant culture, used outside of their original cultural context, and taken and used in such a way that, yes, outside of the cultural context, very often not giving any credit or recognition to members of the originating culture, and very often this is done without the consent of members of the originating culture, sometimes in the face of, asked, hey, can we take this? And they say no, and they do it anyways. And then what the after effects of this is that the members of the dominant culture profit, and the members of the minority culture do not. They do not share in any of these, in any of the profit earned, and they're not given credit. And then the long-term effect of all of this is that the copy supplants the original in the minds of even members of the minority culture. So this kind of imposter kind of coming in insidious form. And in that way, one of the best examples that I could think of is that throughout most of the world, rock music, rock and roll, is being the origin. Rock music is thought of as a white form of art. And if you ask certain rock fans, even rock historians, continue to perpetuate the lie that rock music is a white invention, as a Caucasian invention, when in fact it arises from the jump blues in the 1940s and 30s. So it is a deeply black form of cultural expression. But the thing is that even if you would ask, a number of different African American people, hey, is it rock is black or white, or how did it start? They say, oh, that's a white thing, so. And obviously, hip hop is very different. It actually has never been transformed in that way. It's never been successfully fully appropriated by mainstream, white culture. But yeah, is that rock has. So I think that really is an example of what we're looking at with cultural appropriation. Now, appreciation. So appreciation is then asking for consent. Being respectful of boundaries, being respectful of the ideas and of the history of all of these things, and knowing that in one case, that if you're invited, for example, to participate in a set of rituals in a family friend's house, that does not then give you license to do that all over the place. If someone, for example, if someone invites you over to, if your Japanese friend, invites you over to, wear, regalia for a certain event, then that does not mean that you can then, be wearing this all the time. So it's knowing that there are specific circumstances for specific events, and respect has to be given to them in different ways, which I think is really important. And then people always bring up fusion food. I can see it in the comments. That's where things always get very complicated. And of course, transmission, is always ongoing. Cultural transmission is always ongoing. So these things are always murky. But I think, yeah, the short form is yes, appreciation is possible. It's respect.
Well, and I think your Taco Bell example, with the test kitchen and kind of almost the stealing of of the recipes of other cultures and then trying to Americanize that and present it in such a way, and then obviously they're reaping the profits from that. That would be a perfect example of like, okay, this is not authentic, food, and it's just sort of being appropriated and again using someone else's culture to really market something that's not really, it's not authentic to Latinx culture, and that's, I think that's a great example of that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. I think
that.
that's an ongoing
So,
thing. And oh no, please continue.
yeah. No, so we've got a lot of comments there, which is great. I appreciate all the participation. We appreciate all of you being here live too. So Cindy asked, did you take acting classes?
I've had brushes with acting. I was never a drama kid growing up. I was always weary of fitting into that box, but I always did love performing, did love acting. I took one in middle school. I remember this story. My mother still talks about it. That teacher, she said you were the best student she ever had. And, she always wished you would come back. And, this kind of stuff. And I always did really, really love it. But growing up, I was very committed to being serious. I was going to be a novelist or a screenwriter, and I was going to write, very serious, focused work. So performing, and it wasn't until, college came around where I became really convinced. And I did a little bit more of acting there. I took my first acting class in a long, long time in college, and really found, wow, I have some talent, here in this department. But like what oddly enough was it for me, or interestingly enough, was hip hop, was rap. So I mentioned at the top of the program, my friend Eduardo Virgen, and he was a huge fan of rap. And I wasn't at the time. I was into rock music, and I would sing songs. My friends were those kids at school that walk around with their acoustic guitars. They were really insufferable, and and I didn't know how to play the guitar, and I tried to learn, and I couldn't pick it up. But I would just sing, or I would do the rapping parts. If there was a song with like a rapping part, it was like, oh wow, I do a mean Mike Shinoda. Because they're in the Linkin Park at the time. So I was the only one who could keep up with the speed of the rapping parts in these songs. And the funny thing about that is that then when I started getting into hip hop in college, I would practice, and I'd be like, oh, this is really cool. Like maybe I want to be a rapper. But then I learned that just like how I couldn't play an instrument, I couldn't rap on beat either. So then I said, well, I have this gift for performing, and then I saw spoken word and deaf watch videos of deaf poetry, and I saw people being funny. I saw people doing like monologues, really acting a range of different emotions, raising their voice, lowering their voice, whispering, saying things really fast. It was almost like rap in that way. And for me, it was revelatory. For me, it was, and that I could perform my own words, I think was something. I never became as interested in like, I don't know, like some actors really get lost in the beauty of transformation. I never, I have moments of that, but what I really loved was seeing people going out there telling their own stories and the stories of their communities, and that's really what I found empowering.
Would you also say too that, just in writing this book and, exploring your name and your family history more, is that something that's also been empowering for you?
Yes, absolutely. It was, yes, I went very deep into it. So the foreword to the book actually outlines, a lot of our history in that we were big into genealogy. Our whole family has been big into that. We would go on trips to New Mexico and visit, the places that we came from. There's a Romero Street, says the ancestral land of the Romeros, and and then we would go to LDS centers. The Mormons keep very, very phenomenal records. They have a lot of microfilm and newspaper. And so for me, that was always very interesting. It was like being a detective. It was like searching through and looking for clues. And so I was always very fascinated by that and seeing, these pictures, like it comes to life. It's like a rush. And so then, of course, when Ancestry.com, rolls along and I find myself with disposable income, I'm like, yes, I have to get into this. And I just became fully engrossed in it and fascinated in it and learned so much. And yeah, for me, I think it, really it coincided with this need that I had, or this feeling that, I needed to prove myself and I needed to be able to tell people, like, because actually, yeah, back then, and every once in a while now too, and I don't feel it the same because, I have an answer, but a lot of the time back then, people tell me, you're white, my own brother used to tell me I was white. You're not actually part of our family, or you're only half, part of the family. Or I think they used to say, we adopted you and this kind of thing. And there's, of course, there's nothing wrong. It's very beautiful. But
Right.
with all of that, with having,
But when that's not true and your family's just teasing you about it, making you feel like an outsider in your own family, like,
right,
that's maybe
right.
not.
Right. And especially what I do is that sometimes I go after people, from my own culture. I go after certain things or I attack certain things that become controversial. And that's especially when people would be, they would come out and they would take this attitude of, who are you to speak about this? You're not Mexican. You're not actually Mexican. Someone lied to you. Kind of thing. And so then it became more of like, I've got the receipts right here.
You want to see my whole family chart? Like, how far do you want me to go back?
Exactly.
What kinds of things have you discovered in doing that ancestry work?
So yeah, I mean, I learned a lot more details, and especially a lot of it coincided with my cousin, um, Frank Ramirez. He actually is one that brought a lot to light about that one ancestor that I was pointing out. Charles Henry Howard was a Texas Ranger, a businessman, unsavory character at one point, possibly, he was a Confederate soldier. Former Confederate soldier.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He has this whole, family history. And then on, with my mother's side is learning about that. Yeah, actually this was really beautiful for all of us, is that her baptismal certificate had said that she was from Zacatecas. So I believe this is case. So my mother had always been, my mom is from, about her own mother, that she's from Zacatecas, and that's the story. And then we looked and we found out, oh no, it says Durango here, as well. So then learning about, okay, there was significant time spent there, so really learning something new, about her life, something pretty significant there, was really beautiful. And a little bit more about her father's movements and yeah, we don't always, get all of these things, or we hear about them when we're young, so we take them for granted. We don't record them, a lot of this beautiful history. And I think that's what it helps. It helps us piece things together in really compelling ways. I also learned that possibly, and I also uncovered possible scandal in my father's family line, and which is really, really refreshing, especially being told all of these things about morals and all of this. I'm like, oh, yeah.
That's interesting. The scandal is refreshing to you.
Let me tell you something, your high horse.
I've gone back. I've done the digging, and I can tell you.
Yeah, let me tell you what great grandpa was up to.
Well, and I know too that you talk about in some parts of Los Angeles having the last name Romero was the key to a world of art, culture, and history. And so your uncle is the painter Frank Romero, who is listed as a pioneer of the Chicano art movement. So how much of an influence did he have upon you and your work?
So Uncle Frank Romero of Los Four fame, has had a tremendous influence on me my whole life. He was, gracious enough to give paintings to us. We would always be in these family environments, and it always became something of a joke. Uncle Frank's giving out paintings again, or he's selling paintings again. But and that's had a tremendous impact on me because of that's why he's successful. That's one of the reasons why he's successful, because he's always on that grind.
Wow.
And a lot of people who never sell anything and never achieve, any kind of status, they get to be humble and self-righteous about being humble, and they remain largely anonymous and unaccomplished in relief. But with him is that, his work was always so beautiful. His work is always, it would capture, the spirit of Los Angeles, the spirit, of our culture, with these bright colors and these large, impasto, is the word for it. So where it's the paint is so thick, you can, really touch it, and layer. He's very, inspired by, indigenous artists, Diego Rivera, but also by, Pablo Picasso, with this notion of, different perspectives and all of that being used. And Fauvism, Impressionism, all of these kinds of things are very strong in his work. So, I've had a deep love of art because of him, and because of my Aunt Nancy Romero, as well, and my cousin Sonia, that I had this opportunity that while I was raised in a very blue collar family, a very traditional Roman Catholic family, that we would then, in the suburbs on the outskirts of LA County, that we would then go on holidays or, family parties or whatever, and we would visit the gallery. And I got to see a whole other, world, a bohemian world, world of, these different artists, and talking about these gallery openings and traveling to France and, stuff like that, which really was to me was always, eye-opening and always fascinating, and especially too. So it was this larger world, but it was also in going back to that is that one of the most significant things that I've really come to understand about my uncle's work is, and why he has meant so much to the movement and to so many people as he has, is that he captured moments of conflict between the state, and by the state I mean, the government, not just the state of California or any individual. Right. Here I'm speaking as an academic, the state.
Right.
the state and the people. So the police and people in Boyle Heights. So he has a painting, the closing of Whittier Boulevard. He had a painting of the killing of Ruben Salazar, which was a major moment. Ruben Salazar was this newscaster who would report on issues such as the Vietnam War, the Chicano moratorium. He would participate in a lot of these things, a lot of these activist movements that were very seminal in the 1960s to this organizing. And, the walkouts were another thing. And he was killed. And in a bit of the police said that it was an accident. There are a lot of people saying that this was either intentional or just expressed woeful neglect in the way that he was killed by the police. So and then a more recent work by my uncle, The Arrest of the Paleteros, then shows a new generation dealing with, if those were multi-generational Chicanx communities, then these are immigrant communities, very often are the paleteros, the paleteras, the vendors, the street vendors, making a living, trying to make a living by selling, and then being arrested because they don't have licenses. They're denied, that ability to vend. So, and I think in that way that was very unique, of being someone of the old guard, who was then, speaking to these same issues of conflict, but speaking to it in a way that reflected, the changing of the dialogue and these new communities that were now at the forefront of these issues here in Los Angeles. So I have a great, deep admiration for my uncle's work, and it continues to inspire me.
Would you be willing to share Micro Machines with us?
Yes, I would. So this is a poem, of course, about my uncle, and it's about one of the instances of a microaggression that I experienced throughout my life, and it was something that I easily could have forgotten and let go of, but it's always stuck in my mind. Mexican kid with the white skin and blue eyes knows a lot about art. This brings a smile to the white face of a museum docent. She asks the boy how he knows so much. The boy replies, "My uncle is an artist." The boy says this without a hint of cynicism or derision. This, to him, is the greatest thing a person can be, an artist. The docent asks the boy, "What's his name?" "Frank Romero." "What does your uncle paint?" "Cars. He paints old cars. American cars from the 1920s through 50s. LA, palm trees, freeways, and familiar streets as the background. Always bold in color with a zigzagged impasto stroke, the kind of thing you see that immediately makes you say, 'That's a Romero.'" The boy suggests to the docent, "Maybe he has something here." A pause from her, then, "There's an auto museum down the street. Maybe he has something there." "No, that doesn't seem right." "Maybe what you mean is he paints cars. There's a dusty wood and tin garage under this museum, and the docent has put his uncle into it. They call this aggression, but really it's so easy as she does it. But his uncle doesn't look the same there. His uncle, with bold striped sweaters, full wild hair and beard, laugh big enough to fill a room, larger than life personality, looks very different in the docent's garage. To her, his uncle is a tiny uncle, with a shaved head, brown Pendleton and Dickies, navy work apron, and silver paint spray can in hand. He paints with that in place of a brush. The cars in the garage are smaller too. They're micro machines, and like them, the boy feels small and getting smaller, his hopes, his pride, all the world and its colors shrinking to a vanishing point because he knows what she means. I know what she meant. I couldn't expand upon these ideas fast enough. There is nothing wrong with painting cars, painting pictures of cars, or dressing like a cholo, but we are not all the same. You can't paint us all with the same brush, fit us all into the same stroke. Whatever the medium, there is nothing wrong with taking pride in your work, but what is wrong is for anyone to assume that we are a smaller people, a lesser people. It is wrong to assume that any one of us can't be acclaimed, can't hang in your museum. Give him the top floor because my uncle is an artist, a painter. His work has hung in galleries the world over. You can find him in the Smithsonian, see his mural in LA by the 101. And yes, he, like me, is a Mexican. My uncle is an artist, a painter, who's been paid to paint cars that were literally bigger than the Mona Lisa. My uncle is an artist, a painter, and like me, he knows how to use the principle of diminution, which is making objects smaller in a piece of art to help create a sense of perspective. My uncle is an artist, a painter, and he doesn't get paid to talk about paintings. He gets paid to paint them with checks bigger than your desperate attempts to try and reframe him. And I won't let any of you make me feel small about any of us ever again.
Amen. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Cindy says she's crying, and it was moving me to tears too. It was really.
Oh my gosh! Wow, thank you. Yeah,
no,
it really is those points. I really feel like I write a lot of my poetry out of like, oh, I didn't know what to say then, but just you wait.
I think a lot of writers have that too. We kind of have all these experiences and all these things sort of floating around, and like you said, we may not always be the quick verbal repliers, but it's more like those seeds sort of germinate and become the soil for something that's going to become a work down the road that like you said, maybe we didn't know what to say at the time, but give us a while and then we'll come up with the perfect response that is just rock solid and you can't deny it. So
right. And I think it is a really important poem, and I think it gives me the opportunity to talk about this. Is like, there's an idea when you're talking about fine art, music, painting, culture, that people kind of have this attitude of like that Mexicans can't be excellent, that can't, that we are the salsa people. You are a side dish. Don't you know? Haven't you caught on? You are just a joke. You are dirty. You are criminals. You are this or that. You are not capable of creating great works that will last, the test of time. And countering and saying, I really love this phrase, and it's had an indelible impact on me, by my friend Matt Cedillo. He said, "I'm not good for a Mexican. I'm better than you." And where it is true, for it to be true, to give that space, of like, okay, well, we can, not everything is great, you're like, because that's one of my things that you're like, sometimes people come in as like, yeah, my whatever that I've made is great. It's like, well, it's beautiful, but is it great? I don't know. But when things are great, to be like, yeah, this is not this. Let's see how this compares, to some of the greatest work, ever made, and see how it stacks up. And I actually have a little micro joke in that, because I make this comment about being bigger than the Mona Lisa. Well, if you know art, then the Mona Lisa is actually very small, so it's not that.
Well, you've got kind of a multiple meaning there, I think, for sure.
Right. And actually, as a side note here, and I think this is a real travesty. So if there are any, people in Los Angeles, art curating world, listening, I do have a few fans in that world, few supporters. Is that my uncle's painting has been painted over by graffiti yet again. So I don't know if there's any way that we can remedy this fact, if we can somehow
goodness,
coats of laminates and not just his painting, but all of the paintings that were painted for the 1984 Olympics. These beautiful large murals have now been covered up. And I'm a big fan of hip hop culture. I'm a big fan of graffiti, but like, I mean, come on. This is art. This is beautiful. Find some empty space. Come on.
Find a blank canvas, not painting over someone else's artwork.
Yes. And especially this last one, because it was spray painted in shades of brown, and I believe it was sol, Spanish for sun. So I believe this is someone of Latinx heritage. You're a bitter heart, Sol. You're a bitter heart, Sol. Find your own canvas. It's not my fault. Your father or grandfather or whoever it was that you had this chip on the shoulder didn't accomplish anything as an artist. Don't paint over my uncle's mural.
I can understand that. Gosh.
Oh gosh.
So I know here too, just looking at the cover. So you said that your cousin Sonia created this, correct?
Yeah, she created this for me. Sonia has always been very supportive of my art. She graduated from the Rhode Island School of Art and Design, and ever since seeing her first exhibition in Los Angeles, I was convinced that she was a unique talent. She was not someone who, what I really love about her art is that it is clearly wildly different from her father, which is really beautiful when someone decides to venture so far off stylistically. So her work is very influenced by crafts, by wood block printing. She uses a lot of lino cuts. This particular design of the cover is all digital, but it is inspired by the same way that she creates, the majority of her artwork. That same kind of layered approach, that one would, as if one were doing paper cuts or doing wood block printing, and then mixing media. So I really, really love like how she plays upon the ideas of mass production in her art and folk traditions, at the same time, and pulls together a lot of very impactful iconography, such as is the case with the cactus. We actually both had cactuses in our backyards growing up, so it's really beautiful. And she, at the same time as this, we both were affected by the quarantine in the way that my book came out during quarantine, and her mural at Mariachi Plaza Station in Los Angeles in Boyle Heights was finished being installed during quarantine, so she never got to have her grand opening for that event. So, but she continues to get more art installations, and she is really she gave me my first opportunity to vend at a table was at Avenue 50 Studios, and she's done a lot for me over the years, so I'm really, really grateful to her. Can't sing her praises enough.
Did you just give her carte blanche on this cover, or did you kind of give her any direction as to what you wanted?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting is that I never knew. So here on this cover, it depicts our grandparents and our fathers, our respective fathers, and then our shared uncle. And so this is based upon a family photo. And my initial idea had been to have the cover feature only our grandfather, because that's the only, I never actually met my grandmother. I never knew her. She passed away before I was born. And so, but I've grown up with stories of her, of how she was this caterer and how much my grandfather loved her, and he would, try to dote on her, and she kind of, bark him around, and that they just had these great times, doing all these things together. And that I had presented my cousin with a number of different options, number of family photos. Now this is also corresponding to me doing all that ancestry research, and picking up photos for the family tree. and that yeah, this is the one she chose. And I thought, wow, that's actually really beautiful, because it's a photo that shows, not only our grandparents in being the link, but both of our fathers are there as well. And that this book has micro machines right next to Gorilla Arms, which is the poem about, my own father, and that those poems are right next to each other in the book. So, you get all of this, and I talk about, our grandparents. So you get all of this family history in this book, and it's, so beautifully reflected by the cover.
It's such a soulful portrait too. It's like I just feel like you can almost feel the emotions of the people that she's depicting, because, just the way that comes through their expressions, and, the clothing and just everything. It's very sort of visually impactful, I guess is the word. I'm probably not finding the right words, but
yeah, I really think it's beautiful. And reflecting upon this is like, there's so much missing from us in the last few decades. Like the 2000s and 2010s seem almost indistinguishable from one another. We're entering into this period, and maybe only in retrospect will we gain further appreciation for what our lives were and what all of these moments were. But in reflecting upon, my grandparents' lives, is, they lived through the Great Depression. Their dress reflects that. They lived through, World War II. They lived through the boom of the 1950s, and the promise and the hope of the American dream, and this promise of reconciling, of finally, ending segregation, which here in Los Angeles and California was never, as regimented as the Jim Crow South, but it was de facto segregation. So they're living through, an era of great promise in the world opening up, and leading up to these huge changes with the 1960s. But when you think about, like, very often that's the era when people point to, this is when people were good.
Right, the greatest generation.
We're decent. Yeah, this is the greatest generation. And I think, I think that's the beauty to highlight there, and in the many ways of how we could, living today, reflect those kinds of values.
Well, Cindy has several beautiful comments. I just want to share this. She says, "Thank you, David. You have made an impact on my thoughts and writing life. Forever your fan." And you'll have to go back and read, through the chat too, because there are other comments there just about, different projects that people are working on, and things that they're finding influences in, and things like that as well. So.
Yes, I'm very, very honored by all of the comments, and I'm very honored by being on this program. Thank you so much for fitting me into the schedule, and for this in-depth and beautiful interview. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk at great length about many of these themes and these issues.
Well, you are so welcome, David. It has been such a pleasure having you. And I know that we could easily talk for way longer, but we may lose our audience, and you need to go celebrate your birthday. So we probably shouldn't keep you like forever. But thank you so much just for, your spoken word art is, it's powerful and it's beautiful. And I'm sure that it's having an impact, and, achieving the kinds of things, that you'd like it to. And I hope that, people go out and get your book and explore the themes. And again, there's just so much depth there. I know that there's just so much more that we could talk about.
Thank you very much.
So what's next for you? Let's kind of maybe try to end on that. What you said, you have a novel coming up.
Oh wow! So I have a novel coming up, and I've been very flattered. I did an interview for Words on a Wire out of KTEP in Texas with Tim Z. Hernandez, a very renowned academic journalist, scholar, and author, and he's expressed some interest in my work, so I'm very, very happy to. I need to do a polish on this thing, but it is currently being shopped out to all of the New York agencies and whatnot by myself, because I don't have. I'm trying to get my literary agent right now, but
okay.
So yes, wish me luck in that. And
Absolutely.
if not that, then I will go, with an emerging press. We'll see what happens. Um, but I'm trying to get it into a major because I have a whole trilogy planned. I have a prequel and a
Wow.
sequel. So, with that being said, so there's that. I also have a manuscript, which will be a sequel to my first book of poetry, Diamond Bars 2.
Nice.
Sitting in the wings. That's actually more thematically consistent than the first book. So this will be a real treat. You really want to know, for some strange reason, if you really want to know what living and growing up in a suburban in a suburb of LA County is like, this will really paint that picture very well. So I'm sitting on that. That's going on. I have another project, the Latinx Giant, which will be the follow-up to My Name is Romero, and exploring more of, if that book was very focused on Chicanx identity, this is more broadly based in Latinx identity, and kind of encompassing what I've learned on my travels and snapshots of the different communities that I've come across. So there's that. But in the meantime, I am promoting My Name is Romero very, very, very diligently, very stridently, and collaborating a lot with my press mates here in California. So we're doing a lot of touring, a lot of events. So next Saturday, I have a signing at the Book Jewel in Westchester, Los Angeles. I have a event with them as well, December 4th at Centro Cultural de la Raza in Balboa Park, San Diego. We have events in San Francisco, Oakland, at Beyond Baroque in Venice. I'm doing a signing, individual Barnes & Noble signing at Aliso Viejo. I just had my first signings at Barnes & Noble locations, Rancho Cucamonga, Montclair Place. So I'm trying to build momentum here. We'll see possible signing in Thousand Oaks, and college performances possibly scheduled in North Dakota and somewhere else. But,
Wow.
but I will be on the road
You
a
have
lot.
quite a calendar. You've got a lot going on.
Yes, I'm very busy. At one point I may have been the most busy touring poet in the country, although I'm not very famous, but I was there. I was out there. I was doing it. And quarantine has kind of set me back, but I've been getting into bookstores, in order to offset a lot of that. So yeah, so I'm always thirsty, always on the grind.
You've got a request here for a talk show as well. Talk show, please, someone says. So I don't know how you're going to squeeze that in with all your books, your upcoming books, your speaking engagements.
Yes. I don't know. I might be doing a movie review show. I had a film podcast,
nice.
Criterion Collective, with Matt Cedillo and Jean Marie Spicuzza, an independent filmmaker and poet herself. But I have decided to try to launch my own podcast, Romero Reviews. So we'll see if I ever get that project off the ground. I am, in fact, a critical studies major in cinema. So we'll see if I get off my tush and actually focus on that.
Well, you've got a lot going on. And again, thank you so much just for taking so much time with us today. Your spoken word performance and reading is fabulous. It's great to hear from you. Wish you so much success with everything that you're working on, and especially My Name is Romero. Go get the book, go check out what David is doing, and keep in touch with him. And just thank you again so much for being on Author Talks today. Just so glad to have you, and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Jane. Have a great day.
Thanks. And we will be off next week. We will be back on December 4th with Lisa Luca talking about Ashes to Ink, her memoir. Thank you so much to everyone just for being here live. Thank you for your great questions and interaction. We appreciate all of you. And thanks so much, everyone. Take care.